property owners, neighbors, and architects to continue the tradition that was established nearly 40 years ago in this community. That tradition is a review process that allows community members to work together to preserve the qualities and unique character that make Lake Forest a special community. City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open and democratic meetings, and to achieve that goal, meeting procedures have been adopted by the Commission. A copy of the procedures is available at the back of the room on each agenda. As always, it's the intent of the Commission to help manage the development and growth of the City of Lake Forest with a keen sense of preserving the historic structures and open space in the city for all its present and future residents. Our goal is to move each petition before us tonight through the review process as quickly as possible, while balancing the interests of the petitioners, neighboring property owners, and the larger community. I'm going to begin the meeting, as we always do, with introductions.
I'm John Travers.
Ah, look at that.
I'm Wells Wheeler.
Not sure who should go next.
Jim Preschley.
Kurt Peretz.
Sorry. Robert Elfie.
Oh, that's a new one for us. All right, out of order as usual. Let's see. I believe we have no meeting minutes for this evening. So we will jump right into our first order of business, and that is somewhere here on my list. Consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness approving minor alterations to the residence, breezeway, and detached garage located at 255 North Mayflower. So let's ask if anyone has any conflict or ex parte contact on this. We see none, so come on up and tell us what you got.
Hello, I'm David Moore.
Hi, David.
Kind of funny being here. I used to be there, and
Served 6 years, I believe, on the HPC, is that
yeah,
right?
and alderman for 5 here. So
Welcome back.
thank you very much. I was going to put my little sign up there, but anyway, I thought that I guess I was. You've seen the summary of the request,
We have.
and you visited the property, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. I don't want to waste time or be too repetitive, but we're remarkably excited about this project. It's a light touch to the house that's been remarkably well preserved, and that's a trick word because of the work that was done with a prior owner who made it kind of a modern house. If you didn't know, it had stainless steel doors and was painted black and had lucite handrails and a modern art collection, and the Solomon Smith family. And then Charrington Drake, the former owner as of a week and a half ago or so, spent 3 years restoring it and doing the research on the property. And has lived there for 23 years, and our family will be moving in when we complete the work, if it meets your approval tonight. The house is Shaw's first home in Lake Forest, which is exciting, and the gardens are by Ellen Biddle Shipman, who was very closely tied to Charles Platt for years and did, I think, 9 gardens in Lake Forest. The property has 2 garages. Neither are historic or contributing structures. One is attached by a breezeway, so technically they're both detached, I guess. We wish to attach the one garage by enclosing the breezeway, and then we wish to move some windows around and fix up the detached garage, which has single pane. It's 1970s or early 80s construction. The garage was part of a caretaker's house that was demolished, built in 1970, I believe, and demolished in the late 80s. I'm not quite exactly clear on the timing, but that's about the case. But it's on 5.5 acres, and this is right in the front of the house, or in the front of the property, if you remember. There are 4 things that we would like to do. We would like to change the fenestration on the non-contributing remote garage, repositioning some windows to make it into a bit of a coach house, kind of an office apartment. That's removing the garage door, which is a fiberglass door, putting in some windows. They would be Marvin, I think we're putting in the, it's a simulated divided light. The true divided light have mullions that are about 1.5 inches wide now with the, and they're just kind of problematic. But I think these were, this is a good choice to be consistent with the rest of the house. We would like to return the double window in the master bedroom, and I'd just like to, I think you have this. If you have this image of the house in your packet, I think so, you'll notice that the master bump out, which is easier to see in the illustration. This is the current condition. The house, the rendering I just showed you was from 1898, and the current condition of the house is what you see here. And we wish to change the double window, which is the only double window in the house, to a single window, which, based on the interior proportions and some work by some people that know Shaw quite well, we assume this was a later addition, and a later addition on top of that making a double window. We would also like to upgrade the windows on the non-historic, non-contributing attached garage to the simulated divided light for thermal pain, for fuel or efficiency purposes. And that is, it's an unheated garage, and we've gotten used to our heated garage, so we're going to put in radiant heat, and it only makes sense to replace the windows in that regard. And then also enclosing the breezeway, as I mentioned, and I have some pictures of the breezeway here. As you can see, about 40% of it is already enclosed into like a potting room. The original house is on the right, and the new garage is on the left. So we hope to take that lattice work and fill in with everything to look similar. And that would be the part facing the driveway that this would be the new structure. Should I flick back and forth maybe, or?
One time, please.
One time, please.
Why don't you just leave that one up for a minute, Dave? We've got the other image in our...
And I think, and then I've got my pictures for befores and afters for proposals and that. And I think you've got the detail on the rest. And I read the staff report, and it's quite complete as well.
All right. Thank you. Kathy, do you have some comments on your staff report?
Sure. Just to review quickly, this project does not propose any changes to the original structure, the Howard Van Doren Shaw structure. As Mr. Moore stated, there was tremendous work done by the immediate past owner to restore the house to its original grandeur. The work proposed involves 4 areas: the breezeway, infilling the breezeway. Breezeway is not original to the house. Replacing the windows on what we would call the attached garage, because a breezeway does make a garage attached. Simply replacing the windows to achieve greater energy efficiency. The third component is changing out a double window on the west facade of a later addition on the south side of the house. One of those windows will remain, the rest of the wall will be infilled, and the remaining window will be centered. And then fourth, there is a detached and very remote garage on this property. That garage originally, it actually is located on a separate tax lot, and the house that was associated with that garage, which was a later house built after subdivision, was demolished a number of years ago. So the garage remains. However, the garage is set a great distance away from the house, as you approach the house, as soon as you get onto the main part of the property, that garage is almost behind you. So visually, it doesn't have any relationship. There are some changes to doors and window openings on that structure. All of the work will be done consistent with the existing materials and existing design. And congratulations to the new owner. I think the community is fortunate to have people like the Morris step up and purchase these homes, because this is one that went a different direction at one time. Staff recommendation is to approve the request. The conditions of approval are standard. There's nothing special. Certainly, as we get in drawings for building permit, we will look at the details and assure that that is appropriate. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now is an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions, if they have any, from either the staff or the petitioner. You have questions?
Yeah, I have a question, David. Are you working with an architect to help with the breezeway? And are there more details on what you plan to do with the breezeway? Or?
Yeah, Carol Russ, who's happens to be my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, and has done quite a bit of historic work in the area, lives in Lake Bluff. And are you asking for the interior details?
Well, just in general, I guess more details on the breezeway.
Okay, the breezeway is being enclosed to end up being a laundry room, mud room, allowing us to take the laundry room, mud room. It has a second floor laundry, and my wife doesn't care for second floor laundries, and I don't get a vote in there. And to make the family room a little bit bigger, because the house was a 2-bedroom, 2-office summer home when built, and the family room is kind of a living area on the servants' end of the house. So without expanding the footprint, we're kind of working within the. Is that the level of detail you'd like, or more?
Perhaps I'll ask a question in a convoluted way. I'm good at that. The one comment that we got from Lake Forest Preservation Foundation was kind of an interesting note. It said, we appreciate the way the original garage architect, attached the garage to the house with an open breezeway, thereby respecting the old structure. The open breezeway with its trellises and pottings area also relates to the gardens at the end of the garage at the southern end of the house. It goes on, the proposed enclosure of the breezeway makes the garage a truly attached garage and eliminates the more sensitive treatment. So I think what they were pointing out is that the way that this was executed by the builder of the garage kept it kind of from becoming incorporated totally into the original design of the Van Doren Shaw house, which was kind of an interesting perspective. And your solution, if you go to your sketch, treats it treats it more in the same vernacular as the Van Doren Shaw house, which I can appreciate someone, coming to that conclusion, looking at the house saying, hey, it should match the house, right? But so it's a different perspective of, how you might treat that, piece of the breezeway. And it's an interesting question, whether that merits further review or not. I think it probably, something that we could argue about. It truly is.
I'd be happy to answer it.
Oh, sure, go.
It's an absolute valid observation, without question. But I think the same subordination, the same respect is also achieved by the subordinate roof height. It's a clear connection piece.
Yeah.
And while it is more of a connection piece and more subordinate with the open breezeway, I still think that we're still 90% connecting with a subordinate and appropriate piece.
Great. Other questions for the petitioner or the staff? All right, now's an opportunity for the public, if anyone has any public testimony on this issue. Anybody got any public testimony on this one? All right, I see none, so we can deliberate. Anybody got any deliberations on this one? Is the garage that is not adjacent to the home, the one that's remote, is it going to continue to be used as a garage?
No.
That's it.
No more garage door.
Well, yeah, okay. I was asking him, though.
Motorcycle, sorry.
I kind of got that impression.
He said it was going to be an office.
Is that what it is?
At the risk of saying too much, I'm a hunter. And
Okay, that's enough.
the mansard roof provides a great pallet for taxidermy.
Interesting. All right.
So your trophies are going to be in there? Fantastic. Giant bear.
I knew that about you.
Or the abattoir.
Any other deliberations? If you can call that last one a deliberation. All right, I'll ask if anyone's got a motion.
I have a motion prepared if you would like it.
I'd love to hear that.
I move that the commission, based on the findings detailed in the applicable staff report dated October 30th, 2014, which document that the project complies with the standards in Chapter 51, Historic Preservation of the City Code, and incorporating the materials submitted and presented by the petitioner, and the testimony and deliberations of the commission at this public meeting as additional findings. I move that the commission grant a certificate of appropriateness approving the alterations for property located at 255 North Mayflower Road and condition its approval on the conditions of approval enumerated in pages 4 and 5 of the staff report.
All right, the motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Preschlack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I see none, so congratulations. Good luck with that. You got a project for the winter.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. Our next petition is a consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness approving partial demolition of the residence replacement addition and an attached garage at 995 Woodbine Place. I'll ask the commissioners while the petitioner comes on up and sets up if anyone has any conflict on this one. No. That's good. So come on up and tell us what you got.
Good evening. My name is Amy Wells, and I'm the resident of 995 Woodbine Place. And this is Richard, and he's going to be assisting me with some of the technical details. I'm not an architect nor a designer. There's very little you've all have reviewed the packet, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there is very little known about the origin of the home as it is today. And I will just put a little picture up here for right now. There was an addition that was put on in the 50s, and that is something that we do wish to remove and replace with a larger addition designed in the farmhouse style. There is a shed in the back that we've got some pictures of that is a part of the plan, and it originally belonged to the adjacent lot, which is 870 Woodbine Lane, and there's some different stories about the vegetable man that provided, so it's an interesting story, but yet it seems to be changing the more research we do. And it was not noted, it's not known why the property was divided the way it is now. That City Council notes from 1943 show the current property lines. So even though this shed that's in the back of our yard wasn't originally part of this home. So we want to retain the farmhouse style, or we want to retain the original farmhouse piece. And we need to renovate it to fit the needs of a family with young children, a two-car garage. The street view, we feel, will change very little, and the commissioners will see that there's everything we hope to do. We're really keeping the farmhouse style, working with the designer to stay historically appropriate. I do want to, the agenda or the record, I don't know how to officially say this.
However you want.
Are we following Robert's rules? There's a couple of staff notes that I want to, I don't know if I should say correct, but I want to
Please.
Expand upon. And it's best, all three of them can be addressed with this picture. There was something noted about, what did he call it? Bending. We are keeping that. The original house, as you'll see, it's a little bit lower. We're just moving it up. It's more architecturally friendly with the lines that we're adding, or the roof lines. So we are keeping the bending. The second thing I want to address is the bay window. The previous owner, Mr. Greaves, added the bay window, so the bay window was not part of the first house. And then the third thing I want to just discuss, or not correct, is the porch as it is. I know there's some zoning continuances, discussion about that, but we feel like, we feel that it breaks up the plainness of the front, and it is really keeping in with a farmhouse style. So, I feel like if I keep talking, I don't want to dig myself into a hole, but is there any other information I can provide?
Let's let Kathy give us her staff report,
Okay.
and we'll come back to you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Peretz. This is a very interesting streetscape. All of the homes in that area encroach into the setbacks, but that creates the unique character. I think certainly preserving the house is commendable. The Zoning Board of Appeals did hear this petition. I guess it was just earlier this week. It seems like a long time ago. And the Zoning Board continued their consideration, wanting some input from the Historic Preservation Commission. The Zoning Board does have to consider the hardship for granting zoning variances. In this case, almost the entire house is located within the front yard 50-foot setback, which is a bit unusual. I believe at the furthest extent, the house is 14 feet from the property line, approximately. The 2 points the zoning board raised that they really were looking to the commission for input. One, they asked, is this house worth saving? Or should the house be demolished and a new house constructed to meet setbacks? That is certainly from their perspective, because they have to look at hardships. We did clarify that the house is within the historic district and is considered a contributing structure. Certainly from the staff perspective, the original portion of the house is worth saving. Second, they talked about the front porch, the fact that the front porch, the information they had didn't provide exact dimensions of the front porch, so they weren't clear on exactly how much further the front porch would come forward beyond the existing furthest extent of the house. But they raised the question, could there be another solution that did not require any further encroachment toward the front property line, since they are already 14 feet from the property line? So as you discuss and deliberate, some direction to the Zoning Board of Appeals on those two issues would be helpful. There are various components to this project. The rear one-story addition is proposed for removal. It was not part of the original house. Staff supports the removal of that rear addition. To replace that, there is a large two-story addition with some one-story components. It is very large, but the existing house does have limited living space, and the large addition is located entirely behind the existing house with limited views from the streetscape, some views from off the site. But the overall design, massing, detailing appears to be generally consistent with the original house. A garage is proposed. This property currently does not have a garage. Because the house sits so close to the street, the cars are routinely parked immediately in front of the house within that 14 feet between the front of the house and the street. So we did hear from some neighbors that they do support a garage, really for the purpose of not having those cars be on the street. The garage is attached to the house. It is set back and really aligns more with the rear addition than with the existing house. The garage seems to be appropriately scaled, and the staff report does recommend approval of the porch, of the garage. The potting shed, which is the outbuilding, was originally proposed for demolition. There was some concern on the part of the petitioner that with the potting shed and the addition, the property would be over the allowable square footage. However, after looking at those numbers, we realized it wasn't, and they determined that they would put this forward, proposing to keep the potting shed, but removing the later lean-to that was added to the north side. That lean-to does encroach very close to the north property line and is in a condition that probably lends itself to demolition. The final element of the project is there's a proposed roof modification on the one-story element at the south of the house. That element also appears not to be original to the residence. It currently has a flat roof, which I understand has some leaking problems from time to time. So what is proposed is replacing that flat roof with a gable roof and adding windows on that south elevation of that one-story element. In the staff report, there are a couple areas where we do want your direction in addition to the questions raised by the zoning board. It appears that some of the detailing, in addition to the modification to the front porch, it appears that some of the detailing, as was mentioned by Ms. Wells, on the front elevation is changing. The double banding does seem to be fairly distinctive and give this farmhouse a unique character. Some of the early photos do show the bay window, so from staff perspective, we assume that that was original to the house, but perhaps our information is correct. But looking for input on changes to the detailing of that original portion, on the original residence as part of your discussion. Overall, staff does recommend approval, subject to conditions and some direction from you on some of the elements. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Now's an opportunity for commissioners to ask those questions to either the petitioner or the staff, if you have
I
some.
have a question, if I may. Unless you want to go first, because.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I don't want to step on you again. A question, I think, for Kathy and/or the petitioner. I think Kathy first. I think as the petitioner put it so nicely in her statement of intent, she's told us, as you can appreciate, there are many moving parts to this history, and I think she's referring to the history of the house. And as I'm best able to understand the project, having visited the site and looked at the drawings, there is the intention to demolish some portions of the structures on this site. And but I have not seen, so typically we would see a historic preservation, what do they call it? Historic Preservation Consultant's Report and Assessment, which is required pursuant to Section 51-6 of the Historic Preservation Code. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that. Why should we not be concerned about that? Because I think it's one of the things we really should look for, both in order to make sure that our decision-making is based on a sound foundation, and then also because something is to be demolished, and in most cases will be demolished, it acts to preserve the history of what's gone.
And we did have that discussion with the petitioner early on, particularly when they were considering demolishing the potting shed. At this point, the elements of the house that are proposed for demolition, the rear one-story addition and the lean-to on the potting shed, those, as far as we can determine, and in fact, we're certain that those weren't original to the property. So for that reason, we did move this forward without a historic assessment report, because those weren't original components of the property, didn't seem to be of historic significance, and both of those elements don't necessarily contribute architecturally to the property. So that was the reason that we did move this forward without an assessment.
Follow-up question on that?
Sure.
And I don't want to colloquy with you here, but so when you look at the Secretary of Interior standards, you know, there's much less of a a emphasis on originality as the house was originally built, and houses, residences, other buildings as structures which exist over time and are changed over time, and that has their own historicity, if you will, with it. Does that ever enter into your thinking? Is it only original portions of a structure that, okay?
So it's a question of degrees, I think, for me. I'm not sure it would be for you, but, you know, all the time we do changes to a historic home without a consultant's report because somebody wants a kitchen, and we are in fact letting them demolish some portion of that home. So here, you know, it's maybe a little bit higher degree than the example I just talked about. In the last petition, something is surely being demolished. So I think we've, in the past, typically relied on staff to help us make the determination whether this is in fact a demolition or not, or whether there's important elements that they think that the petitioner should be addressing with a consultant report. Certainly we can tell her that we don't agree with her, but that's her kind of prerogative to kind of set the bar for the petitioner. Now, this is not considered a demolition from the city's point of view in terms of fees and all that kind of thing, right? Or is it?
It's considered a partial demolition, and you do have a review of the demolition standards.
Okay.
But you're absolutely correct. It's a matter of degrees.
Okay.
We do not always require an historic assessment. It certainly is listed
Valid point. You know,
on the checklist sheet that everyone gets with the application. So those are certainly suggestions. And we would have required it if the entire potting shed was proposed for demolition. So that was our thought process, right or wrong.
I think he's got a follow-up.
Can I follow up again? And I don't want to, because by the way, I love this street. It's amazing. I've never been there before. I love the project. Oh, wow. I'm just, I love all the projects that come here. I've told you that before.
I was, oh, wow, you've never been there before.
Yeah, I've never been there. So this is what I wanted to ask then is, we have seen, you know, quite a number of partial demolitions and full demolitions which have come through with the consultant's report. And I'm wondering if in this instance, I mean, would it be burden? It seems as if people knock these things out pretty well. They seem expert in doing them. Is it very burdensome to obtain these reports?
It certainly takes time and it costs money. So we do try and make a judgment on whether they're due to quality, due to history.
Yeah, I guess I'll weigh in on that. I mean, I think typically we'll see those reports when there's a property that has some historical significance attached to it. It's either been called out as a contributing structure, or there's a known architect that's local or national, and it has a little bit of a focus on preservation. So the questions I was going to ask were, you know, Kathy, do you feel like we've exhausted, you know, the kind of normal channels of information to safely say that there's no real noted architect that designed the house? And, you know, if you step back and you looked at the criteria for demolition, for this partial demolition, would you feel like, you know, there's no issues?
I would very much distinguish between the original house and the rear addition. Certainly if a petitioner submitted a request to demolish this house, a historic assessment would be very appropriate, both to understand the house in the context of the larger area, to look at the integrity of the structure. The original house, unlike the rear addition, has some very unique features, some very unique detailing. So again, it was a judgment call. If that's something that the commission determines you'd like to see to support this, we can certainly move in that direction.
No, but on the first question, I mean, do you feel like a report would come up with, oh my gosh, it's an architect that's of renown and this could be slipping through the cracks? Or do you feel like?
I don't believe an historic assessment report would come back with the conclusion that the rear addition is significant and should be saved. I don't know that in this case, anything, certainly the report would probably talk about the entire property and the value of that, but that seems to be going beyond the nature of this particular project. So I don't think we would learn anything about the addition proposed for removal that would be significant or would change the staff recommendation.
Kathy, last question, just factual. Is this a contributing structure within the district or not?
The structure itself, the original house, yes.
Okay.
Other questions for either
Yeah,
staff or the, yeah, thanks.
couple. I take it this is all new siding, the new and the old is being recited in the same siding, is that correct?
Yes.
It indicated on the materials that would be fiber cement. The current one has got a rather distinctive looking siding board on it, albeit I know it's peeling a lot, but probably very difficult to get something that looked like that.
Oh, no, the siding, the siding comes in any.
But it seemed like there was a little bit of a profile to it as well. It just wasn't a standard clapboard shape. Maybe it was hard to tell through all the paint, but.
We'll get through all the paint. I am, in my resident's opinion, it's a small siding as opposed to the larger siding. That's my,
Yeah, but it seemed like it had a little profile on it. Did you see it up
I
close?
didn't notice that, but here, she could get a picture of it.
Whatever.
Looks
Also,
like we might have another opinion
does
here.
have a little bit profile, but it would be very difficult to match that. So we propose to replace it with just.
so it's
regular 4-inch bevel.
going to be the same exposure except flat, right? Also, I read through that.
I'm sorry, could I just clarify that? Could I get you to introduce yourself really quick?
oh,
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
This
thanks.
is-
My name is Richard Pokrowski, I'm a designer and general contractor.
Okay, great. So the existing, the question was, what's the profile of the existing siding in terms of the horizontal line? Is that like a 3-inch or 2.5-inch profile, or is that a bigger profile? Do you know?
It's 2 1/4, I think,
Uh-huh.
with that little profile in the middle.
Yep.
So entire board, I think the entire board is about 5 inches.
So it looks like, even though it's a 5-inch profile, it looks like it's actually really narrow. Yeah. And what are you proposing? Do you know?
4-inch beveled siding.
A 4-inch profile just on a flat bevel siding.
Just beveled siding,
Yeah,
so just typical.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Well, only other question I had, I read that structural report. Are you undertaking all the things that they seem to be suggesting to rectify in this building?
Yes.
Quite a bit of work. Okay.
Other questions for the petitioner or for the staff?
I know that it's a great streetscape along Woodbine, and I think the most distinctive feature is, the west elevation of the two-story portion. And you are going to be replacing the gable treatment with fish scale shingles, is that correct?
There is already existing some kind of it's not exactly the fish scale, it's a little bit different.
Right, the existing is
A little bit different.
really distinctive.
Right.
So that's what I was hoping you could either restore or replace, just the same texture, the same pieces.
It will be difficult to match exactly
Okay.
the same existing, so we propose to match as close as possible, so we come up with that.
The scallop.
fish scale.
Okay,
Well,
with the
how would
scallops. Similar to the issue with the lap siding, is that correct?
Yes.
So the scallops will also be fiber cement.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Any other questions? All right, let's see if there's any public testimony on this issue. Do we have any public testimony on this one? Come on up and introduce yourself, please.
My name's John Dick. I live at 900 Woodbine Lane, which is the property due east of this property. And my concern or need of comfort is in the landscaping plan on the east boundary, which I guess is under the purview of this committee. The building mass is coming towards me 50 feet roughly, something like that, which gets a little closer with a bigger chimney and a big facade, two-story facade instead of the one-story facade. And my question overall is a more definition of the landscape screening that is specified along the east fence, which now just says, southeast will help to mitigate the size of the addition as perceived from neighboring properties. I'm curious as to more on-the-record definition of that phrase from the petitioner.
All right.
Because while I'm young, I want to have the plants grow up.
Thank you, appreciate that. Any other comments, public testimony or comments? Going once, all right, great. Now is an opportunity for us to deliberate, and we could ask follow-up questions as well. So why don't we start with that one? Kathy, you wrote that condition. Maybe you could give us a little color based on the question, what you had in mind there.
The conceptual landscape plan that's submitted to date doesn't really detail any plantings along the perimeter. It details plantings closer to the house, which probably are less important in this case because of the tightness of the site. So having heard the neighbor's concern, we did recommend to you a condition that would require a detailed landscape plan be submitted prior to the issuance of building permits. And we specifically talked about plantings along the east and south property line, and we can certainly expand that condition to talk about communication with the neighboring property owner once that plan is developed or submitted to the city.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea in this case, excuse me one second, to include in your staff review at the time, if we get this far with this petition, at the time that you would get a landscape plan to share that with the adjacent neighbors and to collect any commentary so that you would have an opportunity to understand and perhaps even meet with them if they wanted to. That's a good addition. Other public testimony? I'll take one more if you got. Oh, please come on up and you got to use the microphone for us because the folks at home won't be able to. They will hear dead silence for a while.
Which they might like.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I'm Mary Ann Wells. I'm the property owner.
Ah, there you go. I was wondering about that. Amy was not on the thing.
I'm sorry Mr. Dick may have not been home today because that's already been mitigated. I think you were there. I think several of you saw the project.
A lot of trees are being put in.
How high would you say those are? 10, 12 feet? John, it's all been moved today. There's a... and I left you a voicemail, so I'm sorry you came. There's a large berm that we put up, and then we planted the trees on top of the berm, so there's an immediate... We just removed the trees from the front yard that were going to have to come out for the construction. And so it seemed to be a very simple thing to do while the guys were there.
Okay.
All right, and we do have a full landscape plan for everything else all ready to go.
I'm not sure I wanted to hear all that, actually. But thank you.
Welcome.
What do you want to ask about the permit?
No, I have to tell you, we put those trees in 8 years ago when I bought the, and we didn't get a permit to put them in. So I didn't know that we needed
All
a
right,
permit to move them.
trust me, usually in the city of Lake Forest, if you're going to hire a guy with a truck, you probably should call Kathy and find out if you need something. But point taken, we'll take, it's certainly, it sounds like that may be a beneficial move in the end, but.
Well, it seemed with the weather and everything else, it was the right thing in the right time, and I apologize that.
No problem.
So if I want to plant a tree, I need a permit?
Huh?
If we want to plant a tree, we need a permit?
I'm not sure when you need a permit, when you don't need a permit, but I know that there's someone at the city that would be able, know the answer to that question. However, in relationship to a major petition like this, when you're submitting for an approval, we would typically like to see what work you're proposing before you do the work. Because we might decide that the place where the tree should go, or that's a strong way to put it, we may have a different prerogative on how you landscape or what screening is appropriate than what you're just going out and doing. So not to say that in the end it won't prove to be positive because it's October. You had limited opportunity to do tree transplants, et cetera, but my advice in the future would be to just give Kathy a call and tell her what you're up to, and it makes it easier on everybody. She's usually pretty helpful in those situations. And folks at home, call Kathy, she loves it. So thank you very much.
Do you have any other questions as I'm the owner?
Huh?
Do you have any questions for me as the owner?
Let's see, do we have any other questions for Mary Ann? We have, let us deliberate, and if we come up with something, we'll let you know. So now is an opportunity for us to deliberate. Wells?
Yeah, I have, there's an issue with the front porch, the extension of that front porch. Now, the adjacent house it looks like it has a two-story portion that's pretty close to the lot line. And I'm just suggesting we could have some leniency on the extension of that porch, because on the other side, on the property to the south, if you draw a line between both of the westernmost features of the adjacent properties, that I think gives you some leeway with the porch.
Well, certainly this is a unique street in the city, and it's a great street. I've known about this street for a long, long time. I walk down this street all the time because it's a great streetscape, and I think that the character of the surrounding homes supports the proximity to the site. And frankly, I'm sure that the landowner to the east would prefer we don't push the house 50 feet closer to him. So from that standpoint, I think that there's room to support the right design and the right, proximate location. It's a great project, and I think that there's some nits to talk about from my perspective that, have been pointed out. A couple of them have come up already, and a couple of them came up in a letter from the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. Most of it comes down to kind of massing details, and unless you guys want to do something different, I'll just jump into a couple ideas for you. So the perspective drawing, these elevations are always, I won't say deceiving, but they're hard to get your arms around. But the perspective drawings are great, so I appreciate you including those. And the one that's from the northwest is probably the most important view, because this is the view that shows the most the largest bulk of the house to the street, I would say. There's something going on here that I'm not sure. There's a window in the stairway, and it's not showing up on this elevation, but it breaks that banding. The banding wraps around the corner, comes from the west to the north, and then it turns again to that bulk that's set back a little bit, and there's a window that falls halfway between the first floor and the second floor, because there's a landing in the stairwell, and that's going to be right in the middle of that banding. Then that banding continues, it hits the roof, and then on the perspective above from the east, the banding gets kind of fussy around the corner of the home where the roofs intersect. You know what I'm saying? So I'm almost wondering if the banding wants to really go all the way around the house. I almost wonder if it wants to just go around the portion that's on the street. Anyway, it's a detail I think that you just need to pay some attention to. It's not a make it or break it kind of thing. Sure, come on up if you want to talk about it. That'd be great.
Well, the idea was to have that bending all the way around, because it also serves as the windowsill. And on that north elevation, we have some windows, and that bending goes right directly under those.
Right, but won't that stairwell window go right in the middle of that banding?
No, that window is exactly the same as the rest of them.
So it's going to be up high, so when you're standing on the landing...
Oh, actually, when you look at the north elevation right here, that window... The staircase window is this one, right here.
Yes, but where's the landing?
Landing is lower, like somewhere.
Right, so where's the person's head when he's walking up the...
Below the window.
So the window's very high?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's not very high, but it's high.
Just look out of it when you're at the second floor.
Well, let's put it this way, it's
Well,
4 feet higher than all the rest of them to the perspective of the person standing on the staircase, because it's a 8-foot seat, or 9-foot seat.
Yeah, you cannot look out from that window. It's just
Right.
too high. It's just the purpose is just to bring the sunlight.
Okay. Personally, I'd lower the window, but it's up to you. Or actually, it's up to her. Anyway, it's a little bit of a fussy detail. It's just something that you should consider, I think, because you're going to walk up those stairs a lot. And the banding, I do appreciate how that it kind of continues to communicate from the front of the house around the house, but it gets fussy as it starts to get to those roofs. And if you tried to make that banding larger, it would even potentially be more fussy, if you will, on the backside of the home. Anyway, it's just something I was thinking about. Then on the I'll call it the porch canopy, and the porch roof. If you go back to that, yeah, that's great. So you'll end up with some kind of a little bit of a saddle right in that corner, that north corner.
It has to be for the water drainage.
Yeah, for the water to come down. I'm almost wondering, so I'm thinking about the mass of this house, and I'm seeing, you know, I guess the point that the Historic Preservation Foundation made, which I kind of agree with, is when you look at the perspective view from the south, and even from the east, the overall mass of the home is very, very, I won't call it very, very large, but it's a different kind of scale than the original home, right? Because it's 3 times the size of the original home. And so I'm wrestling with the concept of, gee, do you try to interpret the scale of the original home and just let it keep going in this larger scale, or do you try to encourage the mass of the front to look a little bit bigger? I'm not quite sure you know what I'm talking about, Wells? Am I making any sense? So I was looking at this front porch, and so this little porch entry is encouraging the mass of the front of the house to feel very small. And if you were to go to more of a shed roof or a different kind of roof, you have a 412 roof on a third of this home. If you were to do that kind of a shed roof on the porch, you might even be able to make that porch a little bit wider, and you might encourage the front of the home, the mass of the front of the home, to be more in keeping with the rest of the bulk of the home. Now, that's me coming up with some harebrained idea at 7:30 at night after I worked all day. So my point is that, it could probably benefit from a little study on the massing, just to kind of, work through that a little bit.
We had that option with the shed roof, and that roof was cut back with the line of that front element. And that option, that roof and the entry kind of blend in with the rest of the house. With this option, we have that punch. So when you're looking at that window, you know exactly where the front entry is, and you see that entry.
I wouldn't push it back, though. I'm not bothered by the roof projecting beyond the west face of the home. I think that could still project beyond the face. Matter of fact, I'm encouraging you to project it a little bit further south as well. But the idea being is I don't want the front of this house to be treated like a little teeny house when the rest of the house is this, rather large home.
Well, but from the front, you see the little house.
Yeah,
you
you're
don't see
right.
that big house. So looking at from the front on the small house and having that huge entry to it, that would be, I think, out of proportion.
Yeah, well, that's why we're talking about it. Anybody else got ideas here? Go ahead.
Just again, as long as we seem to be nitpicking here.
We're nitpicking.
But the
Trust me, we're
east
definitely
elevation,
nitpicking.
your entrances or doors and sidelights coming out of the thing, you've got a mullion pattern that's quite different than all the rest of the windows. I guess that's bothers me a little bit.
Which one, where are you in?
The east elevation coming out of I guess that's the family room there.
Well, again, we tried. It's gonna be very difficult to match the sidelights, door, and the windows. So what we try to do is to match as close as possible. Given certain door height, it's just a couple of really ways to divide that light. And this is as close as we could get to match the windows.
Well, I guess. Actually, you could almost emulate the double-hung window with just the mutton going across halfway.
I'm still losing you. I'm not sure what you're...
These windows coming out.
I think they're trying to keep the pane size roughly the same shape or size
Well, on the sidelights, yeah.
on the side lights.
Yeah, maybe.
Can I chime in?
Sure, please.
Yeah, so I think whenever you give a plan to 3 architects, there's going to be discussion.
There's
You
actually
know,
4 of us here.
And I think our role as a commission is to look at the totality and the macro of the project and make sure that it's conforming with general guidelines. And in this case, the partial demolition seems to be the bigger constraints and issues. And I feel like I agree with Kathy and her point of view on that. And I think keeping the potting shed and being sensitive to that outbuilding is a really nice thing to do, because it could probably use a yard there as well with kids and things. And I think in general, I'm comfortable with the streetscape, and I'm sensitive to the west view. I grew up just around the corner, so I walk down there a lot. And but I think in general, the big things are done right, and I think we could kind of micro some of the design issues. But I guess I would just challenge us to see if there's any big glaring issues that are against our, better judgment that are happening.
Fair enough. Good job.
Sorry.
Anybody got any big glaring issues? What do you think?
One issue, I don't know if this is anything significant, the proximity of the potting shed to the new garage. Is there any kind of a code issue that we're going to have to, we won't have to address it, but it looks like it's under 10 feet.
That could be an issue for the zoning board.
So it's,
So Kathy, what were the 2 things that the zoning board wanted our feedback on besides just the general character and look and feel of the design? Was it the porch? And then what was the other one?
The zoning board, from their perspective, just wanted to be sure that the approach of retaining the original house and adding onto it was a better approach than seeking demolition approval and starting over meeting setbacks from the staff perspective. Yes, that is a better approach. Second issue was, number one, the zoning board didn't have specifics on the dimensions of the porch, so they certainly needed to know if they're going to approve a 12-foot setback or a 10.5-foot setback, so they needed that piece of information. But they also wanted to be sure that from an architectural perspective, that porch was appropriate.
Yeah, I think on the demolition or the partial demolition, I mean, I kind of feel like that's a decision right for the homeowner. And they obviously want to, kind of live in this house. And I'm not going to say, how they determine what their best use is for the property. I don't know, the commission maybe would have an opinion on that.
I think if this was located on a different street with different setbacks for all the adjacent homes, we'd have a much different perspective on that. But here, I'm not troubled by the existing general proximity of the house. So.
Yeah. No, but it sounded like the zoning board wanted us to weigh in on, is it worth just destroying the house or
No.
tearing it down versus partial?
Well, I mean, the reason for that would be to make it comply with setbacks, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough. And then it sounds like we're good with the porch too. I mean, maybe the sizing to the south, you have some heartburn with, but I think the massing on the front versus the entire house and sizing, it seems like an artistic design issue.
Yeah,
I can
well,
see
here's
your
where
point.
you and me are departing a little bit. You're big picture and I'm micromanaging, and the reason I'm micromanaging is because this is, like, what is the distance? It's like, you could reach out and touch it as you drive by, this
Yeah.
is right on top of you when you're coming down the street, so
Yeah.
I'm anxious for the petitioner to be as happy as possible with her ultimate product, and so I certainly wouldn't hold up a petition based on my prerogative on whether the porch should be, blue or green or yellow or
Yeah.
red, but I think that there's room in the design development of this to test that yourself a little bit. Think about it hard, mock up a little cardboard model at home, whatever it is, but this is right in your face when you drive up to this home, and I think that it's true when you look straight on the house, it's a small-looking house, but you never get that perspective. You'll never perceive this house as being small, because when you drive south on the street, when you drive north on the street, you don't see anything until you get to the front of the house, but immediately you see the rest of the house as you go by it. And when you drive south, it's going to be perceived as a large building. And so that porch will look diminutive in scale to the rest of the building when you're coming home, when you're pulling into your driveway. It will look small because the rest of the house is quite large. And so I'm not particularly troubled with it. I don't think it's going to change the character of the city of Lake Forest if you get it wrong, but I'd really rather you got it right for your own, so you could walk down the street and say, well, they finally got it right. I'm like the, anyway, I would look at it myself. Whether it comes off the face of the house 2 feet or 3 feet, or, you know, I'm not troubled by that because I don't think it really imposes any difficulty on the rest of the neighbors for that. So that's the only thing that, you know, I would encourage them to look at harder. I wouldn't ask them to bring it back to us to grade, but I think that there's room for improvement there, and I think that there's probably room for, you know, some tweaks on some of the other massing, and surely you will find those. Some of them you'll find as you go. The cement siding, I get it, I think it's okay, you know, so, you know, I wouldn't impose the original siding on a home this size. And 4-inch profile is probably very appropriate for a house of this size. You could even, you know, then probably make that in 3-inch profile too, that you might even be happier with, and if you looked at that, you know, you could look at it.
Explore those options.
Yeah, it's an option. Any other comments?
If we're doing deliberations?
Sure, yeah.
I'm just going to say my deliberation real quickly, which is, if I may, I don't want to. Go for it. Okay. And that is, I do think that the provision of the Historic Preservation Ordinance that requires applications for demolition to include, among other things, a historic preservation consultant's report and assessment is a very important part of what we can be a very important part of what we do here, both from the standpoint of providing a firm foundation for decision making, and also from a historic preservation standpoint, documenting that which has been removed. And I have within myself sometimes been concerned that we have not enforced that provision of the ordinance in situations where we would have been better to have done so. And so my own thought would be in this case, and there are quite a number of moving parts going on here, and the history of this property is complex, and as you've pointed out many times, and as I saw for the first time today, this property is very much in your face when you're on the street. I wonder, given the soon impending nature of our next meeting, whether it would be such a terrible thing to ask the petitioner to come back with a consultant's, a historic preservation consultant's report, and continue the matter till then, and perhaps if there are other issues which need to be addressed or refinements that should be seen, those could be addressed at that time.
And thanks for that, John. Are you, first, let me ask Kathy a question. Is there an obligation as a part of the going forward work to document any of the existing conditions of this home?
It would not be unusual for the commission to add a condition that requires documentation. You've done that in the form of photo documentation,
And I'm
measured
trying to-
drawings, which may not be appropriate in this case, but
I'm trying to decide, I'm trying to understand, John, if your perspective, if your prerogative on this, or that's the wrong word, if your point on this is that you want to be able to point to a record of what was here, or it would change the nature of how you might act on this if you had more or different information?
Both. And my first point is, of course, that it's required by ordinance. And when I came on this commission, I said to myself, if there's anything I want to do, is to ensure that all of our neighbors are going to be treated in an even-handed fashion. And to me, that meant, let's just try and stick to the ordinance and move through things. And so this is a requirement of the ordinance. And obviously, if there's a case where somebody has taken down a stick, that would be absurd. But this is a historic property with a complex history, as the petitioners kindly pointed out. And so I believe this is on the side of the ordinance, which says, and it's unequivocal, that there should be a historic preservations consultant report, as well as a structural report. They provided a structural report.
But it seems like Kathy wouldn't necessarily agree with you on that conclusion, right? I mean, that's that's an interpretation of an ordinance, not a requirement.
No, it's a specific, and so what, first thing I do when I look at these is I made a list of everything that's required by the ordinance in order, and see whether it's there.
Okay.
Right? And so, in section 51-6, certificate of appropriateness, and it says, in addition to the above materials, the following shall be submitted for all applications for demolition. The first is a written statement addressing the demolition criteria. I think they sort of did that. Historic preservation consultant's report and assessment, which is, has a meaning under the Secretary of Interior standards.
So let me-
And then the third thing, if I may say so, is structural evaluation from an independent structural engineer.
And I guess I'm trying to get to the intent of the ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Was the ordinance intended to require the consultant's report for these kinds of partial demolitions, or was it speaking to a full demolition? I know that we've interpreted it different, we've interpreted to include partial demolitions in the past when they were important. So, we're splitting hairs kind of on this, and I do want to get this right. So I'm looking at you a little bit more to see if you have some guidance for us on that.
I think with any application requirement, there is the ability, and in fact, staff does it all the time, to go through the list and determine what is essential to a particular project. In the case of other types of petitions, sometimes a traffic study is required, and sometimes it's not, just to compare a completely different situation. I think the staff's interpretation is certainly an historic assessment report has been required for any full demolition or any demolition of a significant portion of a historic structure. So we have, again, right or wrong, we've made the decision that, like I said, in this case, when the request included the proposed demolition of the potting shed, we saw that as a significant structure, and at that point, we did say we would require an historic assessment. When that piece of the project was removed and it was simply the one-story addition, we made the interpretation that in this case, the demolition piece was not significant enough to warrant that. We can certainly, with your direction, close that gap. It is, as you said, if someone's demolishing the rear wall to expand out 12 feet, do we require a historic assessment? It does require time. Those aren't things that are usually turned around in 30 days, and it's an additional expense. So we do try and be reasonable as we go through what's submitted to us.
So Kathy, just so I understand, you don't make a clear delineation between, it's more a subjective delineation between full demolition and partial demolition? Because if you read the actual letter of the ordinance, it says demolition, and you'd think, does it mean any kind of demolition, or does that, bar raises for full demolitions where all these things need to happen? But in partial, it seems like you're looking at components of the contributing structure that are not contributing and making an assessment that says, these really weren't part of the contributing structure, and so there's some leeway here on enforcing it. Is that?
Our decision was made on the size of what was being demolished and the significance. The code does define full demolition as anything over 50% of the entire structure.
All right.
So you applied the rule of reasonableness, and the issue here is, right, if somebody's taking out a little bit of a back of a house so that a kitchen can be expanded to the way that everybody does, then you would be less likely to insist on that provision of the ordinance being applied. But if somebody's demolishing a whole house, you would certainly say yes, and if they were demolishing a significant portion of a house, particularly one which you felt was of manifest historical importance, then you would, your tendency would be to insist upon that ordinance requirement being satisfied.
So I can think of past petitions that we've considered where folks have asked to alter what looked to be important characteristics of a important house.
Yeah.
And so in those petitions, we had folks come and detail what the history of the house was, why they were there, what happened, what was that. And in some cases, we've asked the petitioner to change the design of the house or to at least respect those portions of the house and not demolish, these important character items from a house. I can also remember times when we went ahead and let them do it anyway, because it was in the best interests of the overall structure in terms of someone's coming and saving this thing, and it's really hard to do that and get people to do it and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Here, I look at the petition and I'm thinking about a process where someone comes out and tells us whether or not Davy Crockett slept here, but at the end of the day, I feel like I'm informed enough to know that I probably would still let them change these elements of the home, even if Davy Crockett had slept there. Because I mean, it's hard for me to believe that someone could establish these as important character pieces to the city of Lake Forest, let alone this own house. I think I said that backwards actually, but you get my point. So I'm less inclined to burden them here with that. If staff is supporting, has already recommended that they don't do that or suggested that they don't need to do that, unless I was thinking that for some reason there was something important going on here that they've missed.
So what are the things that could be important that we missed that, in fact,
Well,
since
from my
we're
point of
talking
view-
about it, might as well finish it.
Yeah,
It could be part of the original house, right?
What if it was?
That's my question to you.
Yeah, well, my point is that unless there was some distinguishing character to the back of this building that they're removing, that I should honor and that I would want to have, I would want them to respect and include into the new work, I would probably, looking at what's there, I don't see anything that I would say, oh, you can't take that out, that's important.
Sure. What if they were going to knock down the whole house?
Well, I think that then the ordinance would be clear that that would be required anyway, whether I liked it or not.
But Chairman, you know that we've done that, right?
Done what?
We've knocked down whole houses in historical districts
Yeah.
without the reports being required.
We have?
Yes, sir.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. And were they important houses? You don't know,
They were,
because you
well, no, of course. As you might recall, I argued that it could very well be an important house because the architect who designed the house was, his homes were either considered to be in Highland Park, where either significant or contributing to their historic districts. And so my only point to you is I think it's very important that we focus our attention on this requirement of the ordinance, and that's why I brought it up here today.
Okay. Well, that's one perspective. Anybody else want to burden the homeowner with the requirement for that report as a part of our deliberations here? I need to know that because I'm going to either ask for a motion or I'm not going to ask for a motion. So I'd like more commentary from the rest of the peanut gallery.
It appears to me that they're saving the most significant part of the house.
Just to be clear, I'm not sure they're saving.
Or they're
Yeah.
Retaining.
kind of maintaining
Retaining,
or,
maybe,
yeah, or,
retaining.
and it's a jewel setting, and the jewel's being compromised a little bit. It's not going to have all of its old historic characteristics.
Right.
It's being replicated to a great degree, given modern materials and methods. And that is the most significant part of the house that's sitting there right now. And I trust that, the staff has made the right call in saying that, we won't be requiring the historic report. It's, what's going to be left is, the house is going to be transformed into something that's infinitely more livable than the existing house. So, and that's important to me.
I look at the big picture. I walk by this house and I say, here it is. It's a house on a rather large lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's what is the choices to be made here? someone's either going to tear it down
Yeah.
and move it 50 feet east or 75 feet east, whatever the setback is, or they're going to do a major renovation to this home. It's just a question of time, right? It's what's going to happen here. And so we could prevent that from happening at this level if we want to. You know, we could say, no, you can't do this. You know, you create a, you know, I don't think.
Nobody's saying that.
Huh?
Nobody's saying that.
No, I know, I understand. But, so, you know, I'm not sure why we would add another obstacle to this. We either like or don't like what they're building. We either have refinements or we don't have refinements to what they're building, or we object to the location of the house on the site. But I don't think, I'm struggling with what additional benefit there would be to having someone get paid to write a report that says that these elements of the house aren't particularly important to the house, because I know,
Because you feel certain that they're not.
well, they will continue to look to some expert until someone will tell that to us. What would you do? You know, and the first expert says, oh, they are important. Well, I'm hiring another expert. They're not, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Well, you don't have to look very hard, actually. Chairman, can I make a suggestion? Because there is another approach to this. And so, as the ordinance is written, one thing that can be done is Kathy, I believe, can say that she's waiving that requirement. That's an interesting point.
well, she's already done that by not enforcing it.
Well, okay, and so it would be probably helpful if, when she's going to waive that requirement, because that way we don't have to, it's not on us. We're treating our neighbors properly. That's the only thing I have to say.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. Let's see if there's any other deliberations on any other points on this one. So,
They brought up the bay, but I don't have any problem with that removal either.
thank you.
In fact, as a matter of fact, that I think you realize with the bay off, the bay probably projects almost as much as that porch, so I think it becomes kind of,
Different rules probably for baby.
well, yeah, but I mean, as far as the reality of what's
Yeah,
sticking
right.
into the front yard.
There are, yeah, you're right. All right, so Kathy, I would actually encourage you to add a condition to your approval that asks for some photo documentation. I think you can write that, you know, we've done that before. I don't think that has to be a third party, that doesn't have to be an extensive report, but it can be photo documentation so that there's a record of what was here in your files. And if you would mind, what's the right way to ask for this, John? Amending your report to include the concept that you discussed the requirement for a historic report and determined that one was not required. Thanks.
Waive.
Waived.
Yeah, that works.
And we talked about the landscaping already. So that
I would suggest that the
Condition.
condition remain that prior to the issuance of any permits, that we get a detailed landscape plan, less focused on what's going on around the house, but really focused on either what's planted already or what will be planted at the perimeter of the property.
okay, thank you. And you'll share that with your adjoining property owners?
Yes.
Okay. And then, with respect to all my nitpicks, just think about it.
What
Do your
are they?
best. Oh, I'm not going to detail them for the record, because I'm not interested in them changing those. I think that there's, well, let's think about that.
Yeah.
So I think that, with respect to the porch, we don't have any issue with the setback, violation. I hesitate to call it a violation, but that projecting from the face of the west wall. And we would not have a problem with it were it to change to a hip style roof, 412 style roof or something like that, that's in keeping with the other styles of the other roofs. So I'll give you a little latitude there. If you want to change that, you don't have to come back to us.
And on what part of the home will that be?
That would be on just the porch, that front porch that's on on the west side. And then with respect to the banding, if you will, also, I think that we'd be willing to give you a little latitude there. I don't mind the way it's drawn. I don't mind the historic reference either, so should you, in your studies, decide that you want to make that a little wider, wouldn't have any problem. You don't need to come back to us for that. I think you can, you're big kids, you can fight amongst yourselves about that one. I think that's it. Want to try a motion?
I will try one.
All right, appreciate that.
Based on the findings detailed in the staff report dated October 30, 2014, which document that the project complies with the demolition criteria, the standards in Chapter 51, Historic Preservation of the City Code, and incorporating the petitioner's statement of intent, testimony received at this hearing, and the Commission's deliberations as additional findings, I move that the Commission grant a certificate of appropriateness for the 1, demolition of the non-original single-story rear addition and the lean-to on the potting shed. 2, the replacement rear addition and the new garage. 3, a roof modification of the south one-story element. And 4, various other alterations to the existing residence consistent with the Commission's discussion. And condition the approval on the conditions of approval set forth on pages 6 of 6 of the applicable staff report, and subject to the further conditions that the Commission will accept changes to a hip-style roof on the porch on the west side, if that proves to be more desirable to the petitioner, and a increase in the width of banding, if that is more acceptable to the petitioner.
Thanks, how do you do? Pretty good?
There's a couple other conditions on the landscape plan, and did you get that?
Let's see if that's in there. Petition number 2 in the staff report, which is referenced in a motion, is prior to the issuance of a building permit, a detailed landscape plan must be submitted reflecting plantings along the east and south perimeter of the property to provide some screening of the large rear addition from neighboring properties. Should we add to that?
Did share with the neighbor you wanted to mention, and then to document the original structure, photographic documentation, and then to waive the requirement or non-requirement of a historical assessment for a partial demolition.
I'll go with that.
The,
That's our longest motion. in
not
the
sure
history.
who made the motion anymore. The motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. All those, any second?
I think I second.
There you go, there's a second over there. All there in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations, and I'm sorry to drag you through all that. We take this very seriously, as you can see, and it's a great project. Good luck with it, and I'm sure you'll do a nice job. It's a wonderful street, so,
Thank you so much for your time.
all right, good job. All right, we have one more petition tonight, so thanks for bearing with us. This is a consideration of a request for renewal and extension of a previously approved certificate of appropriateness and modification to the previously approved plans at the residence located at 595 Circle Lane. I'll ask if anyone has any conflict on this.
I have no conflict, but usually you also ask for ex parte
An ex parte communication, excuse me, please.
And I don't believe that this ex parte communication will invalidate my work on this, but I do want to make you aware that I, of course, have spoken about this matter with my wife, who is the president of the Villa Turcum Homeowners Association, so just put that out there. And I have spoken about this project. Last time it was scheduled to come before us with the president of the Lake Forest Caucus, who is also a resident of Villa Turcum.
All right, well, it's on the record for that, so appreciate that. I think that's okay.
A conflict of interest? if they
No,
have
I don't
to
think
put one
so. You know, that, the idea here is that unless you got a financial interest in that, that wouldn't be a conflict of interest. And with respect to the ex parte contact, we'd like to know if you've talked to someone important, that we should just be, so that during our deliberations, we can keep that in mind. So I think we're good. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you got.
Great. If you give me just one moment, please.
No problem.
This was on, I turned it off, and I'd like to get this on there. Which button do I press for that, Kathy? Sorry.
See where it says sources?
Sorry, I have to make you walk over here.
Let the record show Kathy is now walking across.
Gracefully. Very gracefully.
That's funny. Oh, okay. Wow, that was not sources.
Sorry, it's getting a little punchy in my old age here.
Thanks, Kathy. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is John Krasnodebski. I'm the architect for this project, and I'm joined here tonight by the homeowner, Terry Rozdalski, his attorney, Bob O'Donnell, and our restoration consultant, Mario McNicky. So we've got a great team assembled tonight. So I'm very pleased that Terry remains very dedicated to the restoration of the most important feature on this property, and that's the lake access feature on the bluff. So he's willing to dedicate a lot of resources to make sure that that gets restored to its ultimate potential. So we're here tonight to ask for modifications to the certificate of appropriateness that was granted 2 years ago. If you remember, we were here actually November 2 years ago, and we were granted a certificate for this home. It remains consistent with the existing design. The house is changed, I think, relatively minorly. It remains an Italian Renaissance design. The size is the same. There are no variances that we're requesting for the new home. It maintains all its required setbacks and sizes, and it fits very well into the neighborhood. And so the modifications I'm going to go through are relatively simple. These are photographs of the site, and you can see that it's a winding street, heavily wooded, and a lot of important landscape features, trees, very important trees on the sites and the neighboring properties. And I'm trying to get, now this won't work. I'm not going to make you come over here. I'm going to go to this. Here are some photographs of some of the historic features on the site. You can see the lily pool, the planter, the lake access fountain, and the pool house. Here's some close-ups of some of the damaged features, which are quite extensive on the site. And Mario is going to go in detail regarding the restoration process and the important elements that are on the site. So when I'm finished with my presentation, I'll hand it over to Mario. This is an existing Plata survey of the home. You can see the reflecting pool in the front, an existing home, which is non-conforming with its setbacks. And so the new home, as I said before, conforms to the new zoning requirements. So I'm going to go directly to the revised scheme. This is a landscape plan prepared by Mariani Landscape. And the most significant change is that we originally proposed an underground garage with a large access ramp in the front of the property. That ramp was basically where the side yard is now, and the underground garage is underneath the courtyard. So that feature has been eliminated, and one of the reasons is by that elimination we can dedicate more resources to the restoration of this lake access. So that's gone, and in its place, we're converting what was once a conservatory into a 3-car garage. It's essentially the same size as the conservatory, so there's no additional bulk added to the project. So now we have 2 flanking wings on the north and south side of the home, and they're spread further apart than the original wings. If you remember, the garage was just below the existing garage, and the conservatory was just north of where this garage is. So they're spread further apart, 40 feet, which allows more light and air to the main mass of the house and allows for a more gracious entry and opens up to the streetscape. So we feel that's a nice addition to the project. Another feature that we're modifying is on the original scheme, we had converted the lily pool into a garden planter on the side of the home. The original lily pool is 115 feet long, and the garden planter was 55 feet long. But what we found in our years of studying the lake access is that much more of that material, that coping, that original material in that lily pool is required to restore properly this lake access. So that's the Georgia pink marble, and we found that there's more extensive restoration and repair work necessary. So we need to use that material to restore this. Anything left over, we do plan on putting there as a garden and water feature at the front of the house. That is the exact coping shape and formation. That's the end of the existing lily pool. So it's got the same radius, same pieces. So any pieces left over are going to be used for that sculptural element there. So the house is the same size, same massing. I'm going to go to the front elevation and show you what modifications we have made to that. This is a close-up while we're at it. This is a close-up of the water feature at the front of the house. So that's the coping that is going to be hopefully left over to use. So we're maximizing the usage of all of that material. I don't know if you remember, but the lily pool, the only existing material that is original in its current condition now is that Georgia marble coping. The interior and the fountains and the waterworks, those are all been replaced and are non-historic elements. So here's the revised front elevation. So what you can see here are the flanking garages that are moved further apart. Originally, they were directly in front of the house. So those have opened up the courtyard space. The massing of the home is the same, the roof lines, the gables, the dormers, chimneys. Now, by moving this garage, which was once a conservatory, further to the south, we've exposed the wall of the house. So we have a new window shown here from previously. There was no window. And then on this side of the home, where the garage was, there were no windows because that's where the garage was. So now this is exposing the house, and we have two windows proposed there. So that's the difference for the front. We're going to go to the back, which is the second most significant elevation. So again, here you can see what's happened to the garages. Now these are further in the background, and they are now on the sides of the existing massing of the house. All this massing remains as is. Here's the north elevation. So you can see the there's been no changes here. The garage is the same. There's a breezeway that connects to the house. So all this massing is unchanged. This is the south elevation. So this was once a conservatory. Now it's a 3-car garage with a mudroom and a porch. So that's a significant element that's changed here. We did consciously try to differentiate this mass through the use of a lantern at the top and some decorative elements on the streetscape to not give it a very predictable symmetry. So looking at it from the street, there are differences, subtle differences between the left and right side of the wings and also the main mass of the house. You can see those windows are not a repetition of the same, or an exact symmetrical layout. So we felt that that gave it a little more interest, a little bit more unpredictability, while still maintaining a fairly consistent massing. These are elevations of the garages. They remain unchanged. This was the original north garage, it's unchanged. The south is a duplication of those doors, however. That's a waviness in the screen and not a waviness in the soffit and fascia of the house. The plan, you can see it's fairly symmetrical. You can see the way the garages are outside of the main mass of the house. They do help in the overall massing of the site, and we have the closest structures to the neighbors are the lowest, and so it kind of builds up to a more major mass in the middle. There's extensive use of porches and loggias throughout. You can see the front porch, the side porches, and the rear porches. Those are all design elements that are, I think, very appropriate to this style of home. If you remember, the original estate home that was designed by Charles Platt was Italian Renaissance in style, and that is the major design focus of this architecture is Italian Renaissance. So hip roofs, lower sloping roofs, symmetrical design, I think are all important features, and we're there as part of the original estate home that was built on 300 acres, and so we felt that that was a nice tribute to the original architecture of the property. I think I'll skip over the second floor plans and the roof plans, and I'll show you, this is a neighborhood plan. So I wanted to show you that it's essentially the same setback as the neighboring property to the north. It's approximately 92 feet. So that, I think that's a good distance. And of course, what we're showing at 92 feet are the lower one-story elements of the design. And then the two-story portion is much further back. You can see everything is built outside of this, inside of our allowed setbacks. So I think it's important to note again that that coping, we've come to realize, is a very important element in our restoration efforts for what we consider is the most important dramatic feature on the site, and that's that lake access. Very unique. You don't see anything like it. And I think, again, I think Terry should be commended for, the resources that he's going to dedicate to the restoration of that. Foregoing a 12-car garage, it's a balancing act of resources, where to apply them. And we felt that that was a really important feature. And so by sacrificing our ramp and our garage, they were able to restore that to its original grandeur. I'd like Mario to expound upon some of the restoration techniques and details. Some more information about Mario. We've worked together quite often. He's a consultant internationally. Just some projects he's worked on. He's worked on the City Hall. He's worked on Elwha Farm. He's worked on Anwencia. He's worked on the U.S. Capitol, the Georgia State Capitol. So I've got a 3-page list of incredibly important projects that he's worked on. So I'm very proud to have him here. I'm very excited that he's going to have a great hand in this project, and I think it's going to make a huge difference. And so I'm going to hand it over to Mario. Thanks.
Good evening. Last week I was in Georgia, actually working on a project at Stone Mountain, where there's a quarry of Georgia marble. We were restoring a train depot made out of marble, and it's been repointed many times, and obviously there are lots of damage there. Our company was hired to provide the materials that were custom matched to the originals and train masons how to restore pointing based on the original features. I've been engaged in masonry for over 30 years. As you can hear my accent, I came from Europe and still well connected with Europe. I was in Pompeii last month with international delegation through ICOMOS, International Council for Monuments and Sites. I'm on a committee for stone and brick restoration. So when we were invited to help with the Villa Turocom, we were very excited about that opportunity. Unfortunately, the state of the features are in a horrible condition due to the vandalism and neglect. We spent many hours trying to identify the repairs, trying to identify original fabric, trying to identify the source of materials that could be potentially used to restore these features. Materials like limestone, Indiana limestone, is readily available. It's not a big concern, but Georgia marble, the pink marble, is not a commonly found material. And we were very excited about some of the material that we could find on site. We found material scattered in throughout the landscape, and we also found some material in a lake. We found obviously material on the lily pond, and we were told that the lily pond might be reduced in size. We have inventoried the material on the lily pond, and we found that about 30 to 50% of the coping will be reused to restore features on the terraces. As far as restoration, we basically applying various techniques. Most common technique in this type of application is Dutchman, which actually consists of removal of deteriorated or damaged part of the element and piecing in element that is carved and attached to the existing element with very precise fashion with the minimum joint, which is about 16 of an inch. Good Dutchman can last for literally hundreds of years. We don't use epoxies for these attachments. We use dispersed hydrated injection mortars, which are being provided by U.S. Heritage Group, which I'm also part of. Our company actually provides materials for restoration of historic structures throughout the country, and like John mentioned, U.S. Capitol is one of our projects. Fortresses built by Spaniards in Puerto Rico and San Agustin, and many, many, many fantastic buildings in the country. There was even Hearst Castle is lately restored with our materials. So we have a great knowledge about appropriate materials, and our belief is that when you restore like with like, you will have like performance and like expectation. And what we do, we always source for materials that are available locally. And to our great surprise was that we have plenty of materials to restore these wonderful features if we can utilize the coping, which is a material that's been on site for 100 years. And the material is has the same patina. The material went through the weathering cycles. So it's when this material is used, is the most appropriate material that you can find anywhere. So as we survey the damages, we noticed that there are conditions that obviously are unsafe, and we have established 3 phases. Phase 1 was is the hazardous condition, eliminate those conditions. by removing pieces that are unstable, also removing material that is creating damage or accelerating the damage, because there were many repairs completed, but these repairs are not completed with materials that would be sympathetic to the historic fabric. So our approach is that we remove those. So hazardous conditions for occupants and hazardous conditions for the remainder of the historic elements. The second feature is, a second phase will be a stabilization phase. We basically stabilize conditions by limiting the amount of influence or amount of wear and tear that could happen until we get to the phase of preservation. And the third phase will be restoring existing ornaments using materials that we find on the site. If we find, for example, a stone in water, we have to allow a few years for the stone to release all the moisture. Because marble is a porous material and it's completely saturated, being in water for many, many years. Obviously, it's completely saturated. So we cannot force dry. We have to allow to dry. But lily pond, coping of lily pond has been on site. It's not been completely saturated. So this material could be used much faster than the material that we get out of the water. So I've been working with many historic structures and monuments and work with many private and institutional owners. And I was always I always have a hard time accepting the fact that it's people want to have wonderful buildings, but they don't have budget to restore them properly. And I wonder why they even bother living in those wonderful buildings if they don't have budget for proper restoration. And I was so happy to come across the owner that is willing to spend a fortune on restoring something that is at the last end of the life cycle. And I think that if we don't have Mr. Rozdolski committed to this project, these features will be completely missing in next 10, 20 years. There will be no sign of those any longer. I'm open to, obviously, questions. I'm not sure if there's any questions right now, but I'll be here to the remainder of time.
Well, why don't we want to do a staff report and then see if we have any questions, or do you want to wrap up, John?
I just want to wrap up quickly. I forgot to mention 3 items.
Okay.
And those were related to the conditions of approval of the last time I was here. So there were 3 conditions for the certificate, and one was condition 2, which required a financial guarantee for the cost repair of the work, the restoration work, tied to a certificate of occupancy. And so now, since we've done a lot more research, we've talked to Mario more, it seems like it's going to be a 4 to 5 year project to restore this staircase. So, its certificate of occupancy is probably going to be required in 2 years for the home. So we want to disconnect that tie between the two. And what we'd like to propose is that in 4 or 5 years, when we've completed the work, establish at that point, if necessary, any kind of financial guarantee to complete the project. So that's one of the criteria. that we were requesting. There's condition number 4, requiring a third-party restoration consultant to oversee the project. And we feel that that's not a good use of time and resources. And we feel very comfortable with Mario and his company and being the main go-to person for this project. And we feel very comfortable that he could liaison with the city and write necessary reports so that we don't have 2 consultants. I don't think there's anybody better than Mario, and I think we've got the best. Let's make the best use of the person that we have on board. And the third condition is condition number 9, which referred to storing materials close to the lake access, which is in the steep slope setback area. We do have to access the site. There does have to be scaffolding set up. The material has to go there. Trucks have to drive there. So fortunately, there are some terraces that exist there, and that's going to be the majority of the material and staging process is going to occur on those paved areas. So we'd like some just clarification that there does have to be access to make this all happen. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make because I forgot to mention those before.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see if we have a staff report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Piritz. This project has a long history, and from the staff perspective, this may be the last best hope for this property. The petitioner, since the approval in November 2012, didn't just move forward with a replacement structure, but took the direction and deliberations of the commission very seriously and has spent, rather than spent these 2 years constructing the house and moving in and enjoying the property, has kept in touch with city staff, has communicated with us, has had numerous hours spent out on the site with investigating, and Mario described it much better than I did. But the extent to which this petitioner has gone to identify what needs to be done, how it is best done, how much it will cost, and how long it will take really is pretty amazing. The structures on the property are deteriorating, and it's really a question. There was some discussion from the commission in 2012 whether it would be better to simply just let the elements fall into ruin. And that certainly is one option, but we will very, very quickly get to a point where not only will they be in ruin, but they will be, and perhaps they already are, in hazardous condition. And then the city does have an obligation to talk about things like requiring removal. So I think this is not a situation where a petitioner has not paid attention to the commission's discussion, has not been diligent. In fact, I believe that the petitioner expected to be in their new house long before now. So from the staff perspective, this is back before you really after very thorough due diligence. We were contacted by the petitioner early on, and he certainly was aware of the expiration of the certificate of appropriateness and talked about whether to move forward. And really on the advice of staff, we said, come back, request renewal and extension when you know what needs to happen to restore those elements on the property. So that's why they're back before you now. The project overall is not changing much, as was described by Mr. Krasnodebski. Certainly a key element of change, the element that the commission spent most of its time discussing, is the lily pond. And that is an element that in the previous plan was going to be deconstructed, a new pond in a different configuration to be used as a garden rather than a pond, was part of the plan. That plan, I think from the perspective of many, from the commission, from the petitioner, from staff, felt like a forced plan. It felt like the plan was working so hard to, in some way, evoke or retain the memory of that lily pond. What's proposed now is, after learning that the materials, the single original material on the pond, the coping, is really desperately needed to restore the lake terraces, that began to lead the petitioners to look at the most reasonable approach. So what is before you is a plan that continues to adaptively reuse the original materials of the pond through the addition of a fountain at the center point in the motor court, evokes the end of the pond, perhaps in a more appropriate way, a way that relates better to the new house than the existing pond relates to the existing house. So I realized that pond was a subject of much discussion, but this does seem to be, as the commission talked about, a real balancing situation. Do you save something, and do you save it in the right way where it's going to last for another 100+ years? Or do we take the gamble and lose everything? I think the petitioners, again, have done their due diligence, have been patient, but at some point I think that they will move on, and I'm not sure that there will be another party that will step forward and be willing to do the extraordinary restoration that is proposed here. The demolition of the residence was previously approved by the commission. That residence is not significant. The residence is not designated. The proposed replacement structure seemed to be accepted, was approved by the commission. The changes that are made now, again, allow the overall plan to feel less forced and perhaps respond more directly to the architectural style. Two other things I wanted to mention. One is that the previous owner designated the garden structures on this property very soon, and I believe it was one of the first locally landmarked properties or elements on the property after the city adopted the preservation ordinance in 1998. The owner wanted to assure that those elements were preserved. The city accepted a nomination. The commission approved that nomination and really didn't ask any questions. I think what we've learned today is when we get those local nomination requests, we need to look longer term. We need to understand how those elements or the property may fit into the larger context of the neighborhood or the overall site in the future. Perhaps understand at that time if elements are falling into repair. Ask at that time for information about restoration and really understand what designating some of those structures means over the long term. So I think we've learned to ask different questions. Finally, I did want to quickly mention what's before you is a request to renew the previous approval with modifications. That approval would be the reissuance of the certificate of appropriateness with some modifications and would be extended for a year. There also is a request to modify 3 conditions. I think that based on the additional work done, modifying conditions makes sense. There's a concern about linking the restoration work directly to the certificate of occupancy. I would argue that, in fact, if the replacement structure is done and the owners are actually living on the property, there's a greater sense of urgency to get the restoration done. Given the time frame for the restoration that we now know is 4 to 5 years, it certainly makes sense to enter into an agreement, and we would suggest that a timeline be required and that we enter into some kind of a memorandum of understanding that binds the petitioners in some way. We would work with the city attorney on developing exactly what that language is, but enter into an agreement that does not necessarily link the completion of the restoration to the certificate of appropriateness, but instead links it to an agreed upon timeline. And then the city does, through its normal processes, have the ability to require bonds for completion of work at the times we deem appropriate. Second condition to be modified had to do with an independent consultant. Certainly, the consultants that are working on this project now have exceptional credentials. The city would always have the ability, if we didn't understand information that they were providing to us, we could always, our code allows us to bring in outside expertise if we need to, and charge that back to a property owner. We can do that from an engineering perspective, from a tree preservation perspective, and certainly from a restoration perspective. So I don't think we need to complicate this more than it needs to be, knowing that we have reliable people who are working on this project. And then finally, the steep slope setback. Before any restoration work begins, we would require a staging and construction plan, and we would involve the city engineer, certainly understand what type of activity needs to happen within the steep slope. All of the restoration is going to happen in the steep slope. So I don't think that condition was written to preclude anything from happening in the steep slope, and it certainly is reasonable to clarify that. From the staff perspective, again, this may be the last best opportunity to preserve some of the historic elements on the property. We do recommend approval of the request for renewal, extension, and modification. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now's an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions of either the staff or the petitioner. If anyone has
Got a couple.
questions. Sure.
On my drawing, I don't know if this is just a leftover from the other, but the front elevation of the now garage on the south side still shows, I don't know if those are trellises and pilasters or whatever on, but the plan just shows a solid wall, so I don't know which is the.
There seems like there's some elements
That's-
in front of it.
That's a good clarification question, yeah. So what we have here, these are trellis work that's applied to the solid wall. So they're fairly flat, they're not coming out a significant amount. So they're relatively flat, applied against the wall.
And a half-round pilaster between it, or?
Correct, correct. We do have columns, limestone columns, in the design of the home, and so these are going to be half columns engaged on the wall.
And then what we're looking at, the white, I wasn't on the commission for the previous, so this is, the white areas on the building are brick, is that correct?
Correct. It's all, basically all brick. There is some limestone detailing. The base
Right.
is limestone, the banding is limestone. We have some urns that are limestone, some copings, chimney caps. The loggia columns are limestone. There is limestone treatment around the windows.
So pretty much all the detailing is.
The
limestone.
detailing, right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are all the design elements based on the original?
I wouldn't say all of them. The original had loggia. There are many that are based on the original design. Loggias for one. The roof line, the hip roof, half-round windows. The architectural style, the Italian Renaissance design is very much a tribute to the original design.
And the wrought iron detailing, is that?
Now that I don't, there was some wrought iron in the original. I don't know how extensive it was. There was more wood lattice on the original. I couldn't quantify that for you off of memory.
I'm getting a feeling that, the elevation is maybe a little too busy with all that wrought iron, and maybe the wood trellis elements might be used to replace some of that. It's just my impression.
Wood versus wrought iron.
It's a little fussy. So
Maybe the design could be simplified in its ornateness of the wrought iron itself versus curved, more rectilinear as a possibility.
okay, yeah, it's something worth considering,
Yeah. Okay.
but not mandated.
Got it.
So just for clarification. So I think Wells and Bob were not members of the commission when this was originally heard. I believe, Jim, were you? You were, and John was. So we have a little more background, the three of us,
Right.
than you. So feel free to jump in on other questions too if you want. It's a little hard to follow all of the deliberations and the previous submittal. So, John, you had a question.
I did, and I just wanted to clarify, I think for the sake, at least, of some of the commissioners who weren't here before, the reflecting pool, the lily pool, it goes by a lot of names, which is on site and intact, was designated by City Council as a local historic landmark. Is that correct? I've got the form in front of me.
Yes, the pond and the bluff terrace, the various garden features.
Right, and so specifically, the pond is listed. And so before, in the prior plan, would you agree that there was a thought that the pond was not going to be totally demolished because a pond which sometimes was a pond and sometimes was a planter, but was going to be created in 2/3 scale on the property using the materials from the maybe we should call it lily pool?
Sure.
Lily pool.
The marble coping was going to be reused in a newly constructed, reconfigured pond, and I believe, and some other locations on the site as well.
Right. And now that's not going to occur. And so would you agree that what we're talking about here is a demolition of the lily pool now, unequivocally?
It probably would have been a demolition in the first proposal.
But there was a lot of fig leafing about that, and people were looking at it different ways.
So
But now unequivocally, it's a demolition.
yeah, I mean, let's be pretty, call a spade on this one. I think the trade-off in the original petition was that we had a very significant artifact on the lakefront that was at risk of being lost and could be saved under the petition that was advanced. The lily pool was basically being lost, although there was an artifact of it being recreated, a notion of it to suggest the same kind of thing, which is what John's talking about. So there was a quid pro quo going on there that we said, well, we have this now, but it's not great, it's falling apart, it's going to go away if we don't do something about it. So if you do this, that would be at least better than losing this forever. Frankly, we didn't spend a lot of time deliberating the house one way or the other because there wasn't really it wasn't a historic house on its own, and it wasn't. We didn't grade too severely the execution of the house. Frankly, we trusted at that time, I think, that the house could be done well. So it was more about the artifacts, I think. And
Though
so
Susan Athenson, actually, as you may recall, her issue was with the house.
you might be right.
Yeah, because she comes from DRB.
Yeah. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have issues with the house now, and so I almost look at this like a fresh petition in some ways. So because there's some significant changes here, and we have different people on the board anyway. So, but you're right. We had a remnant of the pond being recreated to suggest the pond in the location, which is now going to have a garage. And before we had an underground garage, which I'm not sure is a better solution. Matter of fact, it's interesting. The Preservation Foundation thought that losing that ramp down to a garage was actually a benefit to the, in terms of the impact on neighbors. You don't have a ramp you don't look down a ramp as you drive by, but be that as it may. There's also some other minor points they pointed out. There's shutters on the front of the building above the front door on one side of the windows, but not on the other side of the windows. It's kind of an odd execution. They were wondering if they were bifold or if they actually operated, or if there was a reason for those to be there. I probably could look at that and think about that a little bit. And they thought that the large window on the right-hand side of that elevation that we're looking at was out of scale with respect to the rest of the building. I'm not sure, the building's quite large, and so these drawings have a tendency to lie to you a little bit when you look at them at these small scales. So I think rather than spend too much time on the home, though, we should really ask questions about the masonry restoration, the execution of the pool. Let's make sure we understand what's being proposed, and then we'll have time for deliberations after public testimony. So any other questions for either the...
Can I ask a question to Kathy again?
Sure.
This is just about how we handle this procedurally here. So way back when we worked on this in 2012 over the course of 5-6 months, a lot of material which the petitioner paid a lot of money, by and large, to create, and that the neighbors spent a lot of time creating, and staff spent a lot of time creating, was presented to the commission and utilized in their, and I remember it, I mean, these were very long, in our consideration of this matter. And the one thing I'm really focused on, of course, because a lot of people have focused on it, is the demolition of the lily pond. And I'm wondering, and I want to ask you for your opinion on this, wouldn't it be a good idea to put that material into the record now? I don't think it'd be a great idea to ask the petitioner to go back and do everything again, but all that stuff exists. I mean, and some of it staff put into the material, into the record, like the American Landscape Architect magazine with the article "The Lily Pool Garden at Villa Turicum," right? The local landmark nomination form, which is highly informative. Large number of letters from folks in Villa Turicum about this matter. Really insightful material coming from the Historic Preservation Foundation and related folks about the status of this, so that this commission would be in a position to make an informed judgment about the demolition of the lily pool. Can we do that?
Actually, because this is a request for renewal and extension, it's all part of the same record. So certainly all of that material is available. We did bring this forward based on the fact that it was approved. It was a split vote, 4-3, in November of 2012. But we did bring this forward, not recognizing all the work the petitioner has gone to, recognizing the lengthy discussions that the commission has had.
Because we're not chopped liver, it's expensive for us to do this.
A request for
this
renewal.
This has been on the docket 5 times since I've been here, and we've heard it 3 times.
So a request for renewal and extension with some modifications seem to make more sense than simply starting over. But yes, all of that information is part of the record. This is a continuation of that record. We can certainly provide that information, but we were springing from the point that this project was approved. It's a request for renewal and extension with some modifications, certainly the lily pond being a key piece.
And it was the key issue the first time. Okay, and so would you be willing, if this matter was continued, to, in fact, I could provide you with a list of the materials, to, in fact, provide that to the commission for their consideration, the same materials we had before?
Certainly, we have all those materials if that's the direction you choose to move in.
Okay, because I could scan them too, but it'd be better for you guys to do it.
Yeah, so, I mean,
That's my question.
so as I recall, I mean, I definitely recall the quid pro quo, and, you know, I felt a little bit like the lily pool or pond, you know, becoming a planter and being a third of its size. I mean, you know, it was a different structure with a kind of a tip and a nod to its old use. And its old use proportionally was tied to the old estate. And, you know, there was a subdivision. It's an artifact. You know, I understand the emotional, attachment to it, but it really was out of context with how it was planned and subdivided. The question I really have is, if that wasn't there, let's say it never existed, how much could we restore the walkway to the beach, and how much more in terms of quality and artistic value and preservation can we restore it because it is there and we get to use it? I know that's a tough question, but I think you've kind of held it up as an asset to be leveraged to do what we all kind of thought of as an honorable and amazing thing to be able to do for the community. And I'd just be curious to know, if you didn't have access to it, how, just what you would think of the outcome and the quality and the time, and would it be recognizable to what it was back in the day versus, you do having access to it, just what the delta is and how valuable really is it to that?
Good question. Commissioner, I'm going to hand that one over to Mario.
Okay.
Thanks.
John, while Mario's coming up, I think the other part of that question is what do we understand now about the masonry restoration that we didn't know then? In other words, at the time we made that decision, we thought we had plenty of material to be able to do that restoration and still execute the pool, in a diminutive form, smaller form.
2/3.
And so is there something new that we know now that's different than we knew then?
Thank you. First time that I was introduced to this project, we, from the very beginning, knew that the size of the lily pond will be reduced. And we always counted on the material being available. I believe that anything is possible, to answer your question, Jim, but the quality of the restoration will not be the same. It will be jeopardized if we use materials that are not sourced from the same quarry, from the same bedding, and the same age. For the sake of this project, I think having opportunity to use this material is one chance of the lifetime. I usually don't have these opportunities often. Is that answer your question?
So do I understand it correctly? It seems to me like there's basically, if I get it right, there's basically 3 or 4 phases of restoration.
Yes.
The first 2 years of restoration are largely your priority 1 and 2 stuff where you're getting rid of hazardous conditions,
Yes.
You're doing Indian limestone work, you're doing some concrete parging or cement parging.
Removal.
And some balustrade work, sometimes taking them out, sometimes putting them back in. But none of the marble or recovered lake stone is used in those first couple of years. That's all reserved for the Dutchman and for the restoration of the details and sculptural portions of the work. Is that more or less the idea?
More or less, yes. We will be recovering the first stage. We'll be recovering some of the marble that's scattered in the woods and in the water.
Yeah.
And that will be put on site to rest and to release all the moisture. That material will be used for, because there are larger blocks, this material will be used for larger sculptures, larger work. The lily pond material will be used for smaller units and for mostly Dutchman work where we will require a better match. Veining will be important to match because the marble has a distinct veining in it. So we'll be matching veining, and we have the opportunity to do that when we're using the coping from the lily pond.
So at the end of 4 years or 5 years, whatever
Right.
it takes to get this all done,
4 to 5 years.
the condition of the the lakeside artifacts, can you characterize what condition that will be left in? How is that, what's the best way to characterize that?
Say close to original,
Okay,
where you have all the features recreated. You will be able, possibly if your eyes are well trained, to see where the materials were being replaced, which is part of the history of the restoration.
okay.
But definitely the features will be well pronounced and be able to be enjoyed by the owner and safe to use.
Great, and so, obviously some periodic maintenance over the years, but
Right. I mean, there's always requirement for maintenance, but if you restore it properly, you minimize the amount of maintenance. And proper restoration, for example, is instead of using plastic patches, you use Dutchman, or you replace entire piece. When you install Dutchman, you reduce the size of the joint to basically a hairline size joint versus a 1/4-inch joint, and so on.
so just because the condition that it's left in is important to the conversation, you would say, hey, this is going to be close to original condition, you'll be able to see some repairs if you look hard. You won't have to do a lot of maintenance, but some minimal maintenance on a 2-3 periodic year kind of basis, that
Right, I
kind of
would
thing.
say,
Make sure exposed joints get filled, especially skyward facing
Yes.
joints. But if you do all that, another 100 years, no problem, right?
There's no reason why it shouldn't last more than 100 years. I've been working on structures that are more than 1,000 years old, and
I look forward to seeing
we're
the
enjoying it.
guarantee.
I've been staying in places that are older than 1,000 years old.
All right, thank you. Any other questions
Thank you.
for?
I had just a follow-up question. And so what percentage of the lily pond do you think you'll use
Yes.
in the restoration work?
Yes, thank you. At this point, we have identified a minimum of 30-40%, but as we start discovering conditions, which in many cases are hidden, we anticipate that it will probably extend to close to 60 or so percent.
So do you think it's a large enough percentage on the worst case scenario to stop a side project to, I don't want to say, build a smaller version of the first plan, but to salvage enough to kind of try to create a fountain or some type of structure that...
We mostly interested in straight pieces because we have more abilities to carve out of those than the curved pieces. So the idea of using curved pieces is an excellent idea. And when you're looking at the historic buildings they built by Romans or Egyptians, you noticed how often the materials were reused for different structures, and this is pretty much the same concept of thinking, which I applaud.
No, I don't understand. Does this require then the city council to sort of decertify the lily pond?
That would be the usual way of doing it.
Is that the way it has to work, or what?
I'll ask Kathy.
We haven't done that in the past. The commission has had the authority to make these decisions. I think in this case, Commissioner Travers asked the question of, is this a true demolition in comparison to what was previously approved by the commission? In both cases, the existing lily pond was being removed. What we know is the only original component of that the lily pond as it exists today is the coping. So I think it's a matter of interpretation. The coping is being reused on the site in one or more elements. So I don't think de-designation is necessary. There will still be a component of the property that will be designated as a local landmark, and in fact, that those elements will be restored, preserved, and able to last at least another 100 years.
Kathy, have you ever really demolished a 100-foot by 35-foot designated landmark before? I mean, it's sort of
Bold stuff.
It's sort of like out there a little bit relative to what we normally do. Specifically, that's a question. Have you ever done anything like that? What historic landmarks have been knocked down without city council action?
I cannot, I know that contributing structures within the district have been approved by this commission
Done it here.
for demolition. So again, based on the previous commission approval, essentially the same thing would be happening. The existing lily pond,
Don't they,
in either case, would be completely
agenda everything we do anyway?
taken apart.
No, consent agenda deals with our,
I'm sorry,
what deals with our building scale variances. Now, Kathy, in that light, though, I was asking, so in your opinion, we have not actually, it hasn't happened while I'm here, because believe me when I say, the way that was pitched last time was that it wasn't a demolition, it was a movement, it was going to be reused, it was going to be the same thing. So this is clearly a demolition, you're saying at this time in your staff report. I mean, have you really thought through the issue of whether we shouldn't utilize, I don't know, the procedure under section 51-10, amendment and rescission of designation, to make sure that we're on the side of the angels here? Because it was city council that designated this.
And we certainly could do that. We could certainly take it through that process.
I mean, it'd be a little embarrassing if we did it and city council said, you know what, you're acting against what we did.
And again, the previous approval of the commission would have affected the same removal of the lily pond, reuse of the coping on the site. In that case,
Not how it was characterized, though. It was not characterized as a demolition last time, factually.
but we certainly could, if you decided to take action before we finalize a certificate of appropriateness, we could consult with the city attorney, and if necessary, we could take a de-designation before the city council for
would you take his opinion on that?
action.
Hey, I'm just, you can do whatever you want.
No,
I'm just here to try to process everything. I'm not.
Well, I mean, I think let's be careful on, just statements around
Process.
how it was characterized. I mean, as I remember, it was, it wasn't necessarily nice to have, but it was a nice tip to the hat. It was a nice tip to honor the pond, but the pond is massive. The structure that was approved was much smaller, and it was full of plants. I mean, so it wasn't like, it wasn't.
Well, sometimes it was full of plants, sometimes it was full of water. It's the project that
what we
evolved.
approved, what we approved, it was planting. So, I mean, it was not, as I recall, pitched as we're going to keep it and preserve, I mean, it was.
I'm sure that if you ask 7 of us, you'd get a different opinion
Yes.
about that. So it's,
Well, yeah, that's why I'm
it's-
sharing it, right, to try
Yeah,
to balance
right,
that
right,
that
that's
out.
right. I mean, some people, I think, interpreted that as an important aspect of the petition. Other people
yeah.
probably didn't. So.
I think that's
Yeah,
right.
I guess that's why I asked the question, how much are we using
Yeah.
that as a source for doing, what we all know is an amazing.
What we're doing is
Project.
harvesting the
Yeah,
pond.
Right, and how much to harvest, and
And
can
my
we
understanding of
channel,
Dutchman patches is you
but can we
you
channel the
break it up in
same?
little pieces, don't you?
Yeah, you have to.
So, but can we channel the same spirit of compromise or balancing the property right owners by having another tribute to the lily pond in a different fashion, right? I mean,
Well, that's kind of what
that's
they've done on the front. It's just quite small compared to what was, I mean.
Due to insensitive planning when the subdivision was
Right.
laid out, the pond is a white elephant,
But other people have different opinions
But-
about that. That's why we should bring everything into the
I
record.
think it's just awesome, but, I think it probably has to go. And the site is loaded with, it's a fragment farm. It's great. It's just all kinds of great
Right.
stuff there.
Well,
but,
for colloquying here, if I could say one thing
Yeah.
that matters to people in the neighborhood, for what it matters, and people write letters to this, from the streetscape, you can see the pond, and people would hope that that could be even prettier in the future than it is now. From the streetscape, you cannot see what's going to happen to the bluff. And in
Right.
fact, I could be wrong, and I wanted to ask Kathy this. Will the bluff be a public access way to the lake, or is it private property?
The entire site is private property.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any other questions
Yeah.
for either the staff or the petitioners. I'm anxious to see if there's any public testimony. Does anybody else have any questions? Because certainly we can ask any. Is there any public testimony on this one? It's getting thin out there, so.
I'd have left.
All right, so I see no public testimony, so now we can deliberate, even though we've been already doing this. Carry on. Did you have another point, Wells? Or-
No, if the pond can be put to better use by helping to restore the lake features, then, so be it. Although the lake features will not be, part of the public domain, it will not benefit necessarily the public at large, unless you have a boat.
A yacht. So the
Yeah,
yacht
and
is.
you can view it from the lake.
Yeah,
But,
well, that's,
But, the,
So we should all get votes?
so we have to get boats, or learn.
Or make friends with somebody who has a boat.
well, I know, I think, as we start, I think the way I frame this is where do we place primacy or inordinate weight in making this decision? Is it weighted towards the streetscape and people walking by and kind of a tip to the nod to a house that was a replica of an Italian villa in Europe, and it was just copied here, and it was subdivided, and then there was a large pool that, maybe harkens back to those days and you get to walk past it? Or do you tip the scales and the balance to, a property owner in the town who is, has property rights and is doing, significant preservation work on something that is exactly the way it was back then, and so I don't think it's a zero, it's not binary, it's not 0 or 100, but I think we're always striving for balance between, kind of the character of the overall town, preserving the key assets that are, part of our lineage and heritage, and balancing the neighbors and the property owners, and it's tough, it's tricky. There's no right answer. I think that's why all our perspectives are good, and I'm really glad that John is bringing up the old record and other things, because we can't just totally ignore that, but do you place so much weight on it that it's the overriding thing? Like, I live in Villa Turcom and I get to see that.
Yeah.
That's look, it's always been there, and that's part of the street, and by golly, no way, Now that's, pretty heel dug in, and then the opposite extreme is, I don't care about this town, I don't care about any historical culture and preservation, I'm gonna cut down trees and I'm not gonna preserve anything, right? And I think the owner is, doing a fair amount of work around something that's, arguably wouldn't be priority one for the average person. So I think there's a balance there. While I'm sympathetic to the neighbors, if I was in the neighborhood, I would have similar feelings, I'm sure. But I do think this strikes a balance, and it serves a good purpose, and I would be in favor of it.
Let me ask John and, I'm sorry, who are you guys? Bob and Wells. What's your perspective, since you are coming at this late, relative to the stuff that we've seen? Do you need more time and more information to make a decision on this? Do you feel like you're informed enough at this point? I mean, I don't want to ignore John's suggestion that there's 6 inches of documentation already in the file on this. So,
And some quite compelling.
yeah, I agree. And so that's why I'm asking the question, how comfortable are you, being, today, being able to say, hey, I get I get the point here and I'm prepared to make a decision. I'm just,
Well, I mean, not having been around for the other discussions, I mean, just what I'm seeing here makes a lot of sense, but I don't know whether if I were to go through that, that would change my mind in any way, but, as I see it here, it seems very logical.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that we're stuck with making a decision on this thing.
Well, we're not.
But that's,
You're not.
we're not. I mean, we could give you time to do that if that's, if you thought that was important. Because I've waded through it, you've waded through it, and obviously John's waded through it, and, there's a compelling argument. The other side of the coin is that if you turn this petition down, what's likely to happen is that the lake artifacts will go away quite shortly. And it's also likely that the house will probably remain. It's also likely that someone would restore that pond.
right.
Because it's more or less an eyesore today, even though it's what I'm saying? I mean, when
could
the
look like
condition,
that.
the condition of it is not
Yes.
good today. But if you don't let someone do something different on the property,
Yeah.
then a logical conclusion is sooner or later, somebody probably fix that thing up in some way or another. So.
I don't think it has to be in pristine condition to be appreciated.
But
And-
it's almost for certainty that what's on the other side will go away.
Yeah.
Because you can see that that's quite an extraordinary effort to maintain that or to improve that. And so, I'm not opposed to giving you the luxury of more time. I don't know that there's a crucial window of, this thing's been around for a long time, so it's like, we have a meeting in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Something like that?
19.
17th.
I don't know if it can be on that meeting, though, because of the timing of notifications and everything else.
It certainly could. You have the,
Could be.
our notices do give the commission the right to
Yeah.
continue.
So I think I would respect your input on this, if you thought that you would like more time to look at that stuff, or
I don't know that if I did any more homework on it, it would change my mind.
Okay,
And I'm willing to sacrifice that for the
yeah.
lakeside features.
Well, yeah, as I said, it does all make sense to me. Now, again, I say, I suppose there's possibly something in there that would be some big revelation that would change my mind, but.
It's gonna say that it's very important, and it's a artifact, and it's a historic, yeah, I mean, that's what it's gonna
And
say.
a bunch of neighbor letters will be there saying, don't do it, right?
But it's, it's totally out of context now,
I understand. Yeah. I
It's
voted-
lost its significance for me.
Yeah.
Right, and there'll be a letter from
know.
Art Miller, what's his name, Miller,
Art Miller,
explaining how the context is,
Well,
and who this
and,
great
maybe
landscape
it's
architect was, who
worthwhile.
designed Villa Turcom, right? I'm not trying to make a case here, because my primary point was, when I came in here,
Yeah.
I think that the people, everybody should have access to the record, because it's a good record, and they'll make up their mind, and they might make up their mind the same way or not.
Okay. Well, I'm willing to give it another,
Yeah, I mean, if it's only 3 weeks or something like that, I guess.
That's
we
only
can-
fair.
We can look at it again. I mean, that
All right, well, I
if that'll
think
make
that,
everybody feel more comfortable with whatever they do, I mean,
Let's ask some other questions here. With respect to the house itself, what do you guys, let's putting aside the issue of the pond for a moment, let's just talk about the house. Did anybody have any,
Well, Wells had mentioned just some, and I'm not
The
usually going
demolition
down
house?
this avenue, but
The demolition
you had mentioned the, the material use on the facade and the ornateness of it, and I think that's worth exploring. If we're gonna table it, continue it for 2 or 3 weeks, that and the shutter. and-
my point in beating it up further without just saying let's continue it would be, are there other issues that should be addressed by the petitioner in the interim?
Yeah, that's what right. So that's what I was suggesting, that we go down that path
Yeah.
a bit more and give them some specific direction Did the shutter question get answered in terms of?
No, I think that, so that was brought up by the Historic Preservation Foundation. They were asking the questions of what's the purpose of one shutter on one side of a window when you don't have one on the other, so, and then, I guess that was also on the original house, by the way. Probably didn't ask that question.
They're a precedent.
Yeah, I think we don't need an answer tonight. I think it would be something that would be worth, John could give it a little thought and see if he would defend it or not. I'm not sure that I'm overly wrought with it. Also, just to follow up, Wells, on your comment of the busyness of the elevation, whether it's too busy or not too busy, I'm not offended at all, actually, Frank. I think it's a kind of a line weight issue, frankly. I think
Yeah, maybe that's it.
You get printed at, 11.5 by 17, you put an acre and a half of house on that, and it starts to look, but I don't.
They may recede.
Yeah, I don't know that's a trick of the page, I think. But I do think that I'm curious to understand whether the style, I think there's something nice about this being executed in the original style, not so much, I'm not so worried about the particular details of what was there originally, but the style, because it's gonna exist alongside of this lakeside element, should be, executed in a similar style, so I like that. I'm not educated enough to know whether these really big shutters with these round, the top of the round shutters are appropriate to that style, or whether those shutters would really stop at a square. Maybe you could just give us a little more background on the style itself, so that we understand that the way the house is being executed is appropriate. And that one very large window, if it may be that's just fine, in the context of the scale of the building and the style. I don't think it's offensive to the neighbors because the garage is in front of it. But, I'd just like to know a little bit more about how the building sits with respect to the style of the artifacts, because the artifacts are what's driving this whole thing. They're the important part of the solution. And so I'm anxious for to understand and to be confident that the building is being, is the appropriate structure to be next to them, you know what I'm saying? So, anybody else got anything that?
Yeah, I just had one more question on that big window. It's right in front of the elevator, but isn't there a floor in between there?
Got it.
That's the back staircase, and so there's gonna be some volume space there, so, there is,
But I mean, there's a floor at the second floor level, right?
I'll get this back on.
So that would be going through the middle of that window.
Right, it does. There's a landing for the staircase, and so.
So you'd see the edge of the landing through the window.
Right, exactly. Floating stair in front of the window.
Any other comments for folks? So, I think our prerogative's to table this till 2 weeks from now. I believe it's 2 weeks from now. Do you have the date of that meeting?
Wednesday, November 19th.
And I will ask just really quickly the petitioner if there's a reason why that would be a hardship for anyone. Okay. Do I need a motion for that?
Yes, motion to continue. I would recommend that you continue it to the date certain, and the direction I'm taking away is that we will provide copies of the past packet with all the attachments to at least two of the commissioners, and I have to think, actually both Commissioner Athenson and Commissioner Swenson were present at the last meeting, so.
Just two of us then.
But I will.
But Kathy, I think you should provide them to everybody, because most people throw these materials away, I hate to say it, at the end of the meeting, and so they don't.
Maybe I'll send an email out and ask who wants a full packet, just so
That'd be
we're
great.
not copying all those
That'd be great.
materials, but we
You
will
can
do that.
You can assume that we.
Yes, we will definitely, and we'll
Is the
get that
video
out
of
to you.
the previous meeting available
It
still?
is, yes.
Okay.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Kathy, I was wondering also, and this is something that the chairman recommended, and I thought it was a very good idea, would it be possible for you to check with the appropriate attorney for the city to see whether, in his opinion, a rescission of the designation of local historic landmark status is appropriate prior to issuing a demolition permit for a city council designated landmark.
So that'd be nice to know if we could have that information before the meeting, if there was any way to do that, just because it would help us understand it.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, all good ideas. Everybody got that? Anybody want to try that motion?
Oh, yes, I move that we continue consideration of 595 Circle Lane renewal, extension, and modification of previous approval until Wednesday, March 19th, 2014. Oh, my gosh. Until Wednesday, November 19th, 2014. March.
All right, the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Prushlik. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, well, we'll look forward to getting a little more information on that and seeing you back in a couple weeks. Thank you. Lots of hard work on this one, and big project for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thanks.
See you in 2 weeks.
All right. I'll ask if there's any other items for the agenda that are not on the agenda this evening out there for an opportunity for the public to address the Historic Preservation Commission on non-agenda items. I see no one arising for that. Let's see if there's any, looks like we've got a new meeting schedule for next year that's been distributed. Any other announcements, Kathy?
Just the meeting schedule sticks to the standard fourth Wednesday, except when there's holidays, and I don't have it in front of me. But obviously, we poll you for quorums, and if we need a special meeting or need to modify something, we would consult with the chairman and do that. So recommendation is that you approve the meeting calendar just so we can get that published going forward.
All right, so is there a motion to approve the meeting calendar?
I move that. Move.
There's a motion's been made, but I'll say that's been, let's give that to Wells, and we'll give the second to Commissioner, who did that?
Alfie.
Alfie, sorry, there you go.
I think everybody did.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes. What else you got, Kathy?
That's all.
All right, thank you, and is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, adjourn. See you guys next week, 2 weeks.
I don't
whatever
think
it
a
is.
motion to adjourn needs to be seconded, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't second it.
Just a yay.